My name's Kuttnauer. My partner, Fred Manuel, is in the back, best partner in the world. We own Golden Circle Advisors. We're an M&A, mergers and acquisitions advisory firm. We happen to have a specialty in your industry. We literally fell into it, all the puns. To give you an idea that we do have a little bit of experience, these are some of the companies we've sold that you probably may recognize some of the names, and some of the new owners are in this room today. Last Monday, we actually sold the most recent one, All Seasons Portables out of Ludington. If you see Jim Lund, congratulate him. If you see Derek Evenhouse from Caribou, say congratulations to him as well. It filled in a nice piece of his territory. So, what I'm going to go through today is, this is on my agenda. Number one is, when is the right time to think about selling your business? And since the last time we presented, things have changed in this world. We didn't have inflation back then. Now we do. We did have low interest rates. What the valuation process is and how that may have changed a little bit. Who the potential buyers are for your business, as well as the elements of the deal structure. And this is an area that there really have been some significant changes because of this changing environment. And throughout this presentation, you'll see I'm trying to provide you the pitfalls to avoid in possibly selling your business. Question, how many people in the room today are business owners that this topic really may apply to you versus employees? So about 50-50 or so. So if you're the employers, think of this as maybe one day you'll buy the business out. So keep that as a reference. So when is the right time to sell a business? Should be pretty obvious is, when your business is experiencing improved sales, improved profitability, you have a strong economic environment, your industry is doing really well, you're ready to retire or do something else, or unfortunately if you're having some illness problems that you need to sell, this is the time to be thinking about it. As well as done some good planning in your life, you have the financial independence once you sell your business. A bad time to sell a business is when you're having declining profits, your business isn't doing well, your industry is not doing well. This is an issue for everybody probably is, labor issues. Everybody's complaining they can't find employees and good employees. And then this one may not seem like, why is that up there? You have substantial unreported income. This business happens to have some cash component in a lot of your businesses. And that's perfectly fine. We don't work for the IRS. We don't care. But understand that if you can't value a business with unreported income. So these are some of the things we'll talk about in what you may want to avoid doing in the future. So if you're like me and Fred, we're baby boomers. If you are part of our club, there's 70 million of us right now. And if you own a business, there's 12 million baby boomer business owners right now. And over the next 5 to 10 years, they're probably going to be selling. So today, there's not enough quality businesses on the market. But if you're a baby boomer, you should be starting to really think about your exit plan. So the question you have to ask yourself, is this really the right time for you to make a change, to make a new life? What do you want to do next? Have you thought about it? Do you have hobbies and interests outside your business? Is your business your personal identity? And have you talked to your family? Have you talked to your wife? Now that I'm not working, I'm staying home all day, being with your spouse. That may be an issue. So these are the things you want to think about personally. It's not about the dollars and cents. It's how does it fit into your life of making this major change. What the current market conditions, charts really changed since the last time we presented. Last time we presented, we had historically low inflation. We had almost no inflation. We had very low interest rates. In the past year, less than the past year, the Fed has raised interest rates 8 times, a total of 450 basis points, 4.5% above what it was a year ago. That, needless to say, has impact on businesses, performance, valuation. The good news is that capital gains hasn't changed. Capital gains tax rate is still historically low. They haven't changed it yet. But inflation has been impacting valuations. It's been at a 40-year high. We are now starting to see it ease, and it's probably going to continue to ease, but it's not going to be overnight. So this is an issue that we're going to have to deal with for probably a few years. The other thing is, because of all this, their lending practices have become much tighter. They are, inspecting loans much more because they got burnt in the last recession, and our word keeps on coming up. We're not in it yet. Some people may argue, but it's hard to have a recession when you have historically low unemployment. So it's a dichotomy there. But because of that, banks are really becoming much more careful who they're lending to, and there are certain industries they don't like. They don't like industries that don't have a lot of assets, but they still are looking at the cash flow of the business, which is most important. But there's industries like construction they're really staying away from. It's causing a problem in some industries. And finally, there is still a lot of money on the sidelines. The capital market for private equity and for individuals looking for where do I place my money that they're concerned about the stock market, whatever. They're looking at investing in businesses. They're looking at investing in quality businesses. That's the key word, quality businesses with good cash flow. And please, if I have any questions, stop me anytime. We got plenty of time. I'd rather address them when you have them. So, you've heard this term, real estate, it's all about location. Well, selling your business, it's all about the timing, when you're ready to make that change. So, what are some of the industry trends right now? I got this from a group that we follow. It's called IBIS World. They do industry reports several times a year for every industry. I'm going to cover the key ones. And oh, by the way, if you haven't get a handout, either you already saw my presentation because you got it, or if you want a copy of it, it's in the side. Overall, they're talking about the construction industry not doing very well. Well, in Michigan, it's actually doing quite well. And so that's expected to continue in the state of Michigan. The biggest thing that we're seeing in this industry is there's a lot of consolidation, just like Derek just buying Jim Lund's business. He's consolidating, filling up a territory they didn't have before. We're seeing a lot of consolidation interest in here. Nationwide, if you look at the two coasts, the East and West Coast, there are big private equity companies that are buying up small mom and pop and larger septic companies and building into they're calling it a platform. It hasn't really shown up in the Midwest yet, but I suspect it's coming. It will be coming. So that's going to be a positive thing for this industry, especially in the Midwest, in Michigan. The other thing is most people don't like hearing about government and all that. Actually, in this industry, somewhat the government's your friend. A lot of municipalities have already implemented things that when there's ever a property transfer, you got to get your septic system inspected, which is an opportunity for all of you. The state is now looking at that themselves to making a state mandate. So that actually is going to be a positive for you in this industry because you'll be pumping more tanks. They'll be calling you more often. So that's good. The other thing is, because of COVID and all that, we have seen a lot more outdoor events. People are, the need of portable potties are very high, and that's going to continue, as well as especially getting into luxury porta potties. You can barely, people are having a hard time getting those. So, I just mentioned about COVID. Interesting enough, we've come across a lot of industries that we work in that COVID has actually been very good for their business. Obviously, if you're owning a restaurant or you're in the hospitality business, this has been a very bad time for you. But for the septic industry, it's actually been exceptionally good, I think, pretty much across the state, because as we went into lockdown and people were working from their homes and people realized I can keep on working from my home and employers let people work from their homes, guess what? They're using their septic system a lot more than they ever did. And so that means more pumping. If you're up in northern Michigan where I live, where people move to their cottages on the lake or their vacation homes, that their systems weren't designed for continuous use, there's been a lot more failures and a lot more opportunity for all of you. So COVID has actually been a positive for your industry overall. So what type of business you have? You have to really look at your business. And you can see if you're on the top, if you have what I call an established business, one that, the way I define an established business is where the owner is not needed to be there all the time for the business to operate it efficiently. Where the owner can go away to Costa Rica for 3 weeks, never call in, and the business is operating perfectly. That is what you have. You have a much more valuable business than one that you basically have a job. You're either, it's you or just family members, and you are the business. Those businesses, because you are the business, have lower value than those that you have management in place that you can rely on to do the work. So, what are some what I call value drivers and detractors? Drivers are ones that if you do some of these things, it's going to enhance the value of your business. The ones in blue are unique to your industry. The other ones are pretty much any business, obviously positive earnings, a great customer list and so forth. But in your industry, some of the differentiators for you are, do you have a holding tank and you are now part of Part 117 that you can do land application? Therefore, your disposal costs are probably on average about 2.5 cents a gallon. Versus if you're in Traverse City, I believe the current rate is 18 cents a gallon. So if you're forced to pay 18 cents a gallon, you're passing it through to your clients, it's just a pass-through. But if you're doing land application and you can still charge them 18 cents, that's a nice profit. So that's one area. And obviously doing land application. Also, if you have your own on-site water treatment facility, that's a competitive advantage. And finally, diversification. Are you doing septic tanks? Are you doing portables? Are you doing excavation? Are you doing roll-off trailers? All those things, by having diversification. Usually one industry is, if industry is going down, other ones are going up, so you're protected from those downsides. The bad things in regards to your industry is that you're in a city, like I mentioned, Traverse City, and you were forced to take it to Traverse City Municipal, and you're paying 18 cents. There's no profit opportunity for you. Or, as I mentioned, you have unreported income. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, why that's bad. You see it as good. When it comes time to sell, it's bad. I get this question, and I did the roundtables yesterday, and everybody wanted to talk about valuations. What's the value of my company, off a napkin or whatever. To get a real valuation, this is the type of information we require to be able to do an effective valuation. You're going to need 5 years worth of tax returns and its associated financials, whether you're using QuickBooks or Stage or whatever. And in some cases, some of our clients use ledgers or spreadsheets. Not our favorite thing, but we can work with it. Also, we look at what I call the trailing 12 months. If you're thinking about selling your business and want a valuation in July and you had a good first half of the year, we'll want to look at the last 12 months to see how that compares to the prior years. And hopefully, if it's showing a positive trend, we can use that to your benefit. Obviously, your balance sheet, and with that, we want to know what your fixed assets are in value, fair market value. I don't care what it's depreciated at. Most likely, it's fully depreciated. I don't care what you paid for it. What I care is if you had to go sell it on the open market, what would someone pay you given them enough time to sell it, and get a fair price for it? That's what we need. Same thing with real estate. Do you own it? What's its true value? Both as a purchase or with a fair price that you would lease it out to somebody. And then finally is what your non-operating expenses. These are the expenses that you run through your business that the next owner wouldn't have to pay for. And we call that process of doing recasting or doing financial adjustments. And these are some examples. As I mentioned, the easiest way to say is that expense non-operating is if the next day someone had your business, would they have to pay that bill? You have 6 kids, you're paying for all their cell phones, they're on your health insurance, they're not working in the business. That next owner probably doesn't need to pay those unless you negotiate it really well. So, you look at all those expenses belonging to, paying for your gas for your boat. Who would notice, And, most business owners treat their business as their personal piggy bank in one way or another. Most, not all. Those expenses that are not needed, those are the things we look for because that we get to add to your profitability because the next owner doesn't need to pay it. Make sense? Yep. Okay. No questions? Okay, what is your business really worth? I will tell you, when Fred and I go see a prospective client or talk to a new person, and we ask them, hey, are you ready to sell your business? They say, no, I'm not really selling my business, but we ask them, what do you think your business is worth? 9 out of 10 times, they will seriously overvalue the business. Versus going to the guy that, I've been doing this for 20 years, I want to get out of here, so how much is your business worth? And though I would say majority of the time they would seriously undervalue the business. And this gives you, and I will tell you, several of these are within your industry, where we went and asked that question, and then we compared it to the price we sold the business for. And you could see that someone could have left $2.5 million on the table if they didn't come and find out what the true value of the business is. Another 1.7. So on average, we're seeing about 109% undervaluing their business. So some people ask, well, how could anybody do that? Well, if you don't know the answer and the true value of your business, who else? And I would recommend not asking your CPA. CPAs tend to be very conservative. Even if they're certified to do business valuations, they are very conservative. And I give an example. We had a client that their CPA told him, your business is 1 times earnings. And they were about ready to say, well, if that's the case, I'm just going to close up. So they called us up, and we went and talked to them. We sold their business for 3 times earnings. And what was interesting, it was literally a partnership, 2 guys. His wife worked part-time doing the books, and they had 1 employee, non-related. So the business really only had 1 employee. And we sold it for 3 times what the CPA said. So not every CPA is that conservative, but we. What was the amount? Yeah. Well, what was the amount? He probably would have. It was a small business, not counting the real estate. I'm trying to think. I think it was. I think the CPA said it was worth maybe $250,000, and he walked away with $750,000. And
that was not including the real estate.
Not counting the real estate. Interesting enough, in that particular deal, that was the only time we've ever had a situation. We've never had a business that we sold where the value that we assessed on the business didn't appraise for the bank for the loan. That was one of the few deals that they got they thought they got a good value on their business or their real estate, and it came in like $50,000 lower. So they had to be an adjustment. I can't value real estate. So, talking about what is the common way of calculating the value of the business. Everybody likes to talk about metrics, and there's other ways to value a business, but simply some multiplier of something. Some people like to use sales, and I actually had a conversation yesterday at one of the roundtables. Someone said, well, many years ago, I was told the businesses sell for 3 times sales. I have yet to ever see that. Very few businesses sell for sales, and the reason being is, let's take an example. You got a business doing $10 million in sales, another one doing $2 million in sales, and they both are earning $200,000 a year. So one has a 10% margin, the other one has a much lower margin. Both businesses are valued the same. If I go through all the math, most likely they're going to come out very similar in valuation. What, $10 million versus $2 million. But if you ask me which one would you want to buy, I'll buy the $2 million one. It has a higher gross margin, has a much better opportunity, I think, to make positive changes to, versus the one that's only making $200,000 and $10 million. So I personally believe that doing a multiplier of sales is useless, except in very unique industries like accounting practice or a law practice. That has probably closer where that may come into effect. EBITDA is an acronym that stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Most of your businesses don't have amortization. All your businesses you're probably paying some notes, some interest, and some depreciation. And usually when I'm looking at financials, the taxes aren't included. but that is the gold standard for valuing businesses using EBITDA. The second one, SDE, seller's discretionary earnings. That's basically just EBITDA plus what you pay yourself in salary. Not your distributions, but in salary. If you're a substantial sized business, you got 20 employees and all that, we'll probably be using EBITDA. If you're a much smaller business, we may look at seller's discretionary earnings because you're probably not taking salary or your salary is really low. So we have to make some adjustments there. But those are the two that we primarily see in valuing the business. So, as I mentioned, earnings is by far the most important measurement. So, here's a story is that the other thing, when we talked about it in some roundtables yesterday, people say, well, the business is worth X, but also I got all this equipment and it's worth Y, so my business is worth X plus Y. No. Your business is worth based upon the earnings, not what your assets are. Unless you're not making any money, then your business is worth the value of your assets. But if you're making money, your business is worth whatever production, whatever earnings you're making, times whatever multiplier. If you have too much assets, get rid of them. So the business is expected to be sold with all the assets necessary to generate that income. So many of you are excavators, have that part of the business. For some reason, we find that excavation businesses tend to accumulate big toys. And they tend to be, I got a really good deal on this dump truck. Well, when's the last time you used it? Oh, 3 years ago. But I got it. We see that all the time. And so, or we go to some clients that you go to their place and there's literally a graveyard out there of all the trucks that don't work. They use it for parts, and obviously their strategy is, instead of buying brand new trucks, they buy used ones and then fix them up and keep them running and all that. Two things. Number one, get rid of that graveyard because it makes your business show really badly. I would tell you, we had a company that was a major negative on selling their business. It was consistently come up because it makes them question, well, if they got that, then how good are these assets? So if you have assets, that are not needed, you haven't used it for a year or whatever, and you probably will never, won't need it much, then go sell them before you put your business up for sale. Make as much money on that because, or when you sell your business, you tell them these aren't included because you don't need them. So that's the key thing is, don't keep on buying those shiny new toys. But at the same token, if you've got some trucks that need replacing because it's affecting your business, then you got to do it. Until you sell your business, it's your business making your living, so you got to run it like you're going to be owning it for many years. The other thing is, going along with another story is, know what you're selling. This is a true war story, and actually the last time we presented, we told the story, the person that we're talking about came up to us afterwards and said, I see you talked about my deal. And he wasn't mad, he understood he made a mistake. We had a situation where it was a small septic pumping company and did some excavation. We had a list of assets that were included in the business. We came up with a price. We got a buyer that wrote us an LOI, letter of intent, for the full purchase price. And then about a week or two afterwards, the owner goes, hey, but I want to keep that Bobcat. I really could use it. I want to use it for my property. And I said, well, how much is it worth? About $20,000. Okay, great. What we'll do is we'll just take $20,000 off the purchase price so long as the buyer is okay that he doesn't get a Bobcat. And he goes, no. I want the same price, but I want to keep the Bobcat. And I'm going, if you were in that situation, would you accept it? And so we worked for the seller. We went to the buyer and asked him, hey, is this okay? And he started laughing at us. I said, no, I'll either want the Bobcat or give me $20,000 lower in price. Moral of the story, the business never sold. And like I said, a couple years ago, we saw him at a presentation. So know what you're selling. So Now we're really getting the question, okay, well, how much is this, in one of the roundtables, I kept on getting the same person saying, well, tell me how much my business is worth, show me your taxes. But in any case, as I mentioned, if your business is not making any money, then the business is worth the value of its assets, fair market value of the assets. Maybe a few bucks more because of goodwill, yes?
All right, now using the EBITDA and stuff, so I'm looking at it as a buyer's perspective. You're doing all the sales on the back history of that value that you sold the business. Has there been very many bankruptcies where that actually was overpriced for the people that ended up buying it and they went under within a year or two? Or have they all been successful since selling?
Every one of the businesses that we sold, not just in this industry, have been successful, have continued.
So that's been working out as a really good formula.
Absolutely.
For both sides.
For both sides, yeah. And people are also asking, hey, a couple questions that came up. We have some really good opportunities to go after, so we should get more money because of these big opportunities that we can go after. I said, then why haven't you gone after them? It's great that you have them, but if people aren't willing to pay you for opportunity. You buy Apple stock today for $190 a share, but great opportunity. So you're going to go tell your broker, well, I'll pay $230 for it because I've really seen it. No, it's worth what it's worth. But I would tell you, no, we've never had that situation. Matter of fact, we have our first situation right now. We had a company, it's a trucking company that we sold 5 years ago. And the person that bought it told us that, hey, in 5 years I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to sell it. Because I buy a business, I keep it for 5 years, I make improvements, and I sell it. Guess what? We're hoping to close on it. We were hoping this week, probably next week, after 5 years. So, and he's made improvements, and now he's making a nice little profit besides the money he's made over the past year. So, but if you are making money, then your business is worth some multiple, and you can see this is some industry information from a whole bunch of data, the highs and the lows of multiples of EBITDA, SDE, revenue. And, based upon how differentiated, how good your company is versus the other companies, and if you have the higher earnings, you're going to get a higher valuation. So you can see where it may range in. We do track, because we work so much in the industry, here's a few examples of some of the deals we've done with the multiples there. And you can see that our averages are much better than the averages in the prior page. Our average of sales, which again is meaningless, of 1.4 times sales, almost 5 times EBITDA, and almost 4 times SDE. You may ask, why is SDE? Remember, the SDE has a larger number. It has profit plus owner compensation in it. So it would be a smaller multiple. I don't know who that is. Okay, I've mentioned multiple times here what the impact of unreported income. I'm a math person, and it's great. Again, we don't work for the IRS. It's happy that you're taking the cash and all that, and never shows up in QuickBooks and never shows up at your CPA. That's fine. But when you go to sell your business, remember your business is valued at some multiple of earnings. Well, those earnings aren't reported. So therefore, we can only value a business what you report to the government. Because we could try to value it, include in it, but understand that a bank is most likely not going to accept that. And you're opening yourself up. So let's just say, use the first example here. You had $25,000 of unreported income. You're in the 30% tax bracket, so you save yourself $7,500 in taxes that year. We times it by 3, so let's say 3 years. So you save yourself $22,500 in taxes. Okay, that's nice. But your valuation, we weren't able to value that $25,000, and if we sold it at 4.86, you left on the table $121,000 of valuation, or a difference of $99,000. $100,000 didn't show up in your pocket when we sold the business. You take it down to $200,000, the difference is you almost left $800,000 of business value. So it adds up. So our advice to all of you, and hopefully it doesn't take 7 times hearing me to say this and for you to do it, is if you're thinking about selling your business, try in your last 3 years at least, 5 years ideally, to put that money back in the business. The reason I say you don't want to do it the last year, because then you have, I'm an angel investor, and we love seeing companies that their performance is like hockey stick, like this. But when you're selling your business, that's a big what's going on there. So you want that line to be smoother than the hockey stick. Make sense? If anything, that's probably the most important chart for a lot of you. The other thing is, another way of differentiating your business is if you are one of those companies that are in multiple lines of business. Like I said, we see a lot of people in the sump, doing pumping, they're doing portables, they're doing excavation. Some of you are getting into roll-off trailers, and there's a few of you that own gravel pits and sand pits. They're all different businesses, and for a buyer, they like that because there's diversification. So if one industry is going down, the other ones are going up. You're protected, and investors like to have diversification. The only problem is many of you don't separate it. You don't have separate entities, legal entities. You don't have different LLCs for each of these industries, and therefore all the financials are all combined together. Worst case, if you're using QuickBooks or whatever software, in QuickBooks you create a class that associate every expense to that class of each of those divisions, so that because many of you will say, I want to sell everything, but I want to keep the excavation business. I like those big toys, and I like doing that. Well, the challenge is how do you determine, since you don't have separate tax returns for each of those, you have to have some way of saying, these are legitimate numbers for each lines of those businesses I want to sell, so we can value them appropriately and that a bank will accept it. So do whatever you can to associate every income area and every expense to one of those things. The challenge becomes in those overhead expenses. You have someone answering the phones, you have accounting services, things like that. Then you would have to distribute some of those costs to each of those lines. But if you could identify specifically, the more specific you can be, the more credible those financials will be for a bank to look at to accept for financing. Make sense? I'm really sorry we're not talking about chemicals right now, but. Okay, building the right team. If you've seen us present, we always stress this, is that you want to have a team of professionals behind you when you're ready to sell the business. And it's just not, Fred and I, the 2 areas that we think are most important is, and we'll tell you, I know a lot about accounting, and Fred knows a lot about legal, but we're not practicing attorneys or CPAs. So you need those people on your team. We hear from people, hey, my brother-in-law is an attorney. He's a divorce attorney, so he's going to do the sale of the business. Absolutely the wrong person, because then you're getting opposition to each other. The key thing is you want to work with the buyer's team and your team to work as a team together because you want to sell, they want to buy. Lawyers and the CPAs will do anything to make the deal not happen because they don't want to lose a client, and they don't lose anything if nothing happens. So the other thing is it's always in a negotiation. If you tell the buyer is going to write the purchase agreement, he's going to write it most likely very purchaser friendly. Your attorney's going to get it and say, oh, God, throw up on it, and he's going to come and redline that thing to hell, and it's going to be very seller friendly. We know we're going to end up in the middle, so tell your attorneys and your CPAs, let's work together to come up with a fair and equitable agreement between the both parties. So that's the moral of the story here. Is I use the example, you have to have a heart surgery. Do you go to a general surgeon or do you go to a cardiologist? I'll choose that cardiologist every day, except if I need a lobotomy. So then the question is, what type of buyers out there? Who's going to pay the most for your business? The person that's going to pay the most for your business is someone already in your business, a strategic buyer. someone that's going to take your business and add it on to their business. It's worth more to them than someone else buying it and being a competitor to it. So those are the people ideally you want to sell it to most, or someone that's in a similar business, someone that's in a roll-off trailer business and wants to add a line, they want to get in the porta potty business. I would consider that like a strategic buyer because they're diversifying and it's not only be good for them. Versus, a financial buyer. A financial buyer, they just want a deal. They want to negotiate, get it at the very bottom price they can. So the key thing is identifying who the best buyers for your business are. In regards to those potential buyers, then it comes down to, are you going to sell it to a third party, to that strategic buyer, to your competitor, some guy that's looking to get out of corporate America and come buy your business? Those are third-party, unrelated parties. The benefit for those guys is you're going to end up getting probably the most cash at closing. Therefore, you get the most cash, the least risk of not getting all your money. The disadvantage is it's going to take the longest because you got to go find that buyer, you got to negotiate, and during that time, you're going to be losing some of your focus from running your business to working on the deal. So it takes away time from your business, and as we tell people, while you're selling your business, you got to work on the business thinking that you're going to own it for the next 5 years, because something may not happen. But selling it to a third party does take time, especially when you get into what we call the due diligence phase. It's like they're inspecting everything because they don't trust anything, and especially when you're dealing with banks, they want to see evidence of everything. So that's a pain of all the data gathering and all that. We try to give you an idea of what you need to have, versus selling it to a family member or a key employee. A lot of people are thinking about, hey, do I get kids in the family? Should we sell it to them? If you sell it to them, the most likely is, you may be not getting all your money up front. They're going to pay you over time. So there's those family issues. We've heard of family dynamics where one kid is really upset they're not taking a piece of the business and the other ones are going to run it, but the other person never works in the business, but they want the money from the business. Those are all the family dynamics. The thing I will tell you, if you're thinking about selling it to a family member or a key employee, you have to ask yourself 2 key questions, and you have to be brutally honest with yourself and that person. The first question I always ask, do they have the financial resources to buy the business? If not, guess what? You are the bank. You're going to be signing the note to your own business. Or you won't be receiving the money all up front. It's going to be on a land contract or something. And then the risk is if things go bad, you're going to be asked to come back into the business, take it over again, and by that time, it's probably not performing as well. Now you're back in build-up, not a good retirement. The key thing is, do they have the financial resources? But even the more important question is, because we can solve the financial side, the more difficult question, is that key person, family member, the right person to run the business? They may be really good at managing the business day to day, sending out the drivers to do their routes and, seeing how the equipment, making sure the equipment's working well. But are they the strategic leader, thought leader, that can direct the company into the future? We're heading into another recession or whatever. Do they have the ability to make those tough decisions? Or I don't like firing people, or laying people off. If they're not truly the business professional to be able to manage that business long term, then you have a higher risk the business is going to fail and you're going to be taking it back again. So those are, especially with a family member, it's a really tough question. Are you the right person to take the business forward? Only you can decide that. The other thing is when you get to the point is, you're talking to somebody that wants to buy your business. 2 important things, whether you're doing it by yourself or with help. For us, no one sees any information, no one knows the name of your business until they sign a non-disclosure agreement with some teeth in it and show us that they have the capability of buying the business. The last thing we want to do is have your financial information, your highly confidential information out in the public that doesn't have restrictions of keeping it confidential, or most importantly, your competition getting your information. So these are the two key things that you have to do before you let anybody see confidential information on your business. Now we're getting to deal structure, my favorite part. For all of you, the most important thing about the deal structure is how much cash are you getting at closing. The most, the best, you know. Typically, most deals have some amount of seller financing associated with it, where you're going to be paid over time for some portion. The goal is to minimize that to as low as possible. We have a requirement in our agreements that you have to be willing to do at least 10% seller financing. And with seller financing, you're going to get paid an interest, you know, a negotiated interest rate over some period of time. And there's different terms, and we'll talk about that. That's one part. The other thing is most people, in part of the deal, is you're going to have to sign a non-compete agreement. So they're saying that, you know, the last thing someone wants to do is buy your business and then, you know, a month later find out that you just opened another shop up and stole your employees. So you'd have to have a non-compete and non-solicitation saying, I won't go after your employees and I won't be in this business. And it's usually based upon term, number of years, and geography. You know, if you want to go start a septic business in Florida, go right ahead. I don't care. But you can't do it within 150 miles of me. And we've had situations that are, you know, people do that. And then you go to court. So understand that most likely you're going to be asked to sign a non-compete. What the transition period, how much time do you need to help that person learn your business? And the key thing is you want them to be successful, because if you have a seller note, you have some skin in the game. You want them to be successful. At the same token, you're leaving the business. You want to go retire and go to Florida. How much time do you want to spend helping train this person, especially if they have no knowledge about the business? So it is customary that I would say at least 3 months you should be willing, as part of the deal, to help them transition the business to them. And if a good buyer will want you out of there as soon as possible, because it becomes confusing to your employees. Who's the boss? You know, who do I talk to? You know, they want you out as soon as possible, ideally. But you want them to be successful. So typically it's 3 months. We've seen it 6 months and beyond. But at that point, they should be paying you for your time if it's more than a reasonable period of time. And it's not unusual that they will ask you to be an advisor long term. Just, you know, hey, I'm thinking about buying this truck. You've been in this business for 30 years. You know, do you think this is the right pumper truck, or should I go after this truck? You know, you should be, you know, that's willing. And sometimes people get paid to be an advisor, long-term advisor. You know, those are all open. And finally is some type, as I mentioned, a consulting agreement that ties into a consulting agreement if they want you to be one of the advisors, business advisors. You know, you don't have to give it away for free. That's all up to you. So let's talk about banks, because you may not care about the bank because I'm getting my money. I'm going to put it in my bank. But the buyer has to figure out how he's going to be able to find this. There is a term called a minimum DSCR. It's debt service coverage ratio. And I'm going to go into that in much greater detail. But that's what banks and the SBA look at to see if this deal is viable for them and certain guidelines. And the thing is that this is a formula that the business has to cash flow using this DSCR usually over the past 3 years and that year to date, how you're performing. Can you achieve that debt service ratio? Now, I'll explain what that is. The other thing is any business that sells and it has a SBA loan, anything over $250,000 in transaction value, you're going to have to get a business valuation done. Independent, it has to be ordered by the bank, paid by the buyer. Even though you may have a certified valuation, that's not legitimate because it has to be, hands-free, arm's-length transaction. You can't, that other valuation person can't be involved in the deal. And then if you have real estate as part of the deal, you want to, though most likely going to require a real estate appraisal. You should have a pretty good idea what that should be beforehand, but that's going to be required. And then in this industry, it's not unusual, especially if you have a holding tank or you have a fuel tank underground or something like that. You'll have to do an environmental study, a phase 1 environmental study. And if they find anything that's concerning, then you got to go through the laborious task of going to a phase 2 environmental, which takes a lot longer and it's painful. And again, these are things that you won't pay for, but they have a tendency of dragging on and can take time from the deal. So some common terms that we're seeing in these deals, especially with the SBA. Down payments are typically, the banks are requiring anywhere from 15 to 20% down payment. They don't care if it's coming from the buyer, by them putting cash down, or by you doing seller financing. Typically, in the past, it's been 15 to 20% has been pretty normal. The seller financing note, the rate is negotiable. The bank doesn't care what the interest rate is, whatever you can get, best negotiation. In the past, what we've seen the most common terms is it's a 60-month loan, but they have a 24-month standby, meaning that you're accruing interest for 24 months. If the business is doing well, can cash flow, the bank will say, okay, then you can start paying them off on the 60-month loan. And then so you basically get the principal initially, what you sold it for, plus the accrued interest, and that becomes amortized over 5 years, and they pay you off over 5 years. And if your business is doing really well, they may let the buyer pay you off sooner. What we are seeing, especially now, is banks, because the seller note can impact that DSCR, the debt service coverage ratio, because that's considered debt. And if they're paying it off right away, that increases their debt, so it makes it more difficult to cash flow. We are seeing, it's not unusual that the banks will say, the seller note can't be paid back until we're paid back in full. So it's a full standby note, and which is not great for you because you don't get that money, you're accruing interest. And maybe you can negotiate, hey, you pay me interest payments during this period of time, and then once you pay off that note, then you start paying me off in the note. Again, everything's negotiable. And again, the goal is to keep that seller note as low as possible so it has the least amount of impact for you. But we are seeing, especially with higher interest rates and all that, that this is becoming quite normal. And there's always the capability that the person that bought it can then refinance and then get out of that possibly and pay you off. They'd rather pay you off first if they could. The SBA requires the DSCR, debt service coverage ratio, to be a 1.1 ratio, meaning that if the business is, if the note is, annual payments to the bank is $100,000, the business needs to cash flow at least $110,000 a year. So there's $10,000 profit, over and above to support the person. That is obviously very low. The banks can choose any number they want. And what we tend to see is the DSCR has to be at least 1.2, which is pretty low, to 1.35 times, so 35% above what the cash flow is, the debt service. Make sense? And again, every bank is different. They can choose anything they want. Now, this may look a little confusing. On this side, we have the debt service ratio. As I mentioned, look in the middle, the gold bar, the brown bar, you see the 1.2 to 1.35. That's that window. And if we look at interest rates of what the notes are, you can see as the interest rates go up, the debt service goes higher. So the ratio goes down. And most rates we're seeing from the bank is they're adding between 2 to 3% above the prime rate. Prime rate today is 7.75. So that means that most of these loans, they're going to be paying 9.75 to 10.75% interest. Think about a couple years ago, where was prime was way down there. So most deals could get approved. So you can see we're becoming, the intersection between those two grayed areas, you can see as interest rates go any higher, it's becoming more difficult to have these deals get approved. Everybody understand that? Let's take it one step further. Let's look at an example of this is where seller financing comes in. As I mentioned, that most deals are between 15 and 20% down payment, which is either cash up front by the buyer plus seller financing. You can see the debt service ratio, there's the bar 1.2 to 1.3, and you can see as rates have gone up, the amount of down payment needed to make the deal happen is increasing. So as rates continue to increase, we're going to, we're going to see a need to make the deal happen by possibly more seller financing or more buyer putting the cash in one of the two. Make sense? So, one other thing I want to mention, which is unique to your industry, is as we all know, the state is not always the most efficient organization in the world, and I don't think we have many state employees here like the Michigan on-site wastewater one. There was a lot of state employees. Is that we have a licensing issue. So if someone buys your business and they want to start operating the business right away, and they don't have any industry experience, so they don't have the 30 hours required, nor do they have your trucks. Once you transfer the business, you have to be re-inspected. You have to get licensed by the DEQ. Then each vehicle needs to be inspected by the health department. And if you're doing land application, that also has to be approved for the new owner. And legally, if you transfer the business, they can't operate until they get all those things done. And how long does it take the state to accomplish all that? Oh, I wish it was only 30 days. That would be great. Just take a vacation for 30 days, and then you can start working. No, it could take months. And there are some things that we have done knowing that there's a problem of structuring the deal so that this can be eliminated potentially. Now, if someone that buys your business is already in the business and they're just adding, and that's no problem. That's going to be a lot easier. There still are some issues, but there are some strategies we've worked with, and it's much more technical. It's using, IRS elections and things like that in deal structure. But this is something just in the back of your mind to be aware of, because we have had one situation where I remember being at my real estate licensing class, the annual butt in the seat for 6 hours till I can, stay, licensed. And we got a call from a buyer said, I just got a letter from the state of Michigan to cease and desist, no more pumping, because they found that the business got transferred, and now they were able to work it out, negotiate with the state and all that, but there was some definitely some heightened pressure that day. So that is all that I have to use your time up. I'm open for any questions, comments. Yes?
What's your commission?
What's my commission? Our standard commission is we charge a retainer up front to take on a listing. It's not exorbitant. And then we charge 10% of the value of the business that we sell. And then if there's real estate involved, we just charge a traditional 6%. And that retainer gets applied to the success fee at the very end, so you're never out anything. Any more questions? Oh, yes.
Earlier in the presentation, you were talking about the Midwest hasn't seen it yet, but the East Coast and the West Coast, with larger corporations going into the on-site business. Is it a tendency, because my fear with the government requiring all the big testing, is that the large companies such as Waste Management or whatever will be starting to see the trend like in Europe, where mandatory pumping, all of a sudden, all the small businesses like ourselves get acquired and by large corporations, and then it's not even nobody can even start as a startup anymore. Is that a trend going with that, or?
I don't want to see it to that extent. What we are starting to see is not big companies like Waste Management. What we're seeing is people love your industry because it has what I call recurring income. Now, some people don't think about your business as, like, when I hear recurring income, I come from technology. I think about software companies charging a monthly payment, and they love that, or a service fee. But your business, even a pumper business, where you have, you're pumping 3,000 tanks a year, but you have 12,000 people in your database, that's recurring. Every 3 years, a chunk of them are pumping. Same thing with portables. It's either weekly, monthly, whatever. So that's why people like your industry, because of the reoccurring industry. And what we're seeing is typically private equity-backed companies coming in and buying like a significant player in the market, and then they go and buy smaller operations to consolidate up. That's what we're seeing on the coast of organizations like that are, making their first big acquisition and then doing add-ons onto it. What we're not seeing is like Waste Management and big international companies doing that. It's been much more, people being opportunistic.
Kind of like the funeral home businesses are doing right now.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Now, any other questions? If not, we'll be here. My partner Fred, myself will be here for the rest of the day. If you have any questions or you want to talk offline, feel free to come see us. We appreciate the opportunity and love working with you guys.